Hello and welcome to this video of Insight Stream. I'm your host, Dr. Manmohan Radhesham Yadav. Today is 2nd September 2025, and in this video, I will be talking about the speculated motivations of the US President Donald Trump for imposing 50% tariffs against India. I would like to give some context for this. During Operation Sindoor, which was launched by the Indian Armed Forces in retaliation to Pahalgam terrorist attacks, a ceasefire was requested by the DJMO of Pakistan on 10th of May 2025, which was later on accepted by the DJMO of India. Once the ceasefire came into effect, the US President was quick to claim the credit for bringing about ceasefire between these two nuclear powers. This claim was promptly rebuffed by the Indian Foreign Ministry, where it stated that the ceasefire had nothing to do with the mediation of Donald Trump, and it was a decision that was taken in request of the ceasefire request that was placed by the Pakistani DJMO. This has perhaps resulted in some form of animosity in the mind of the US President. Few weeks later, the US President declared that 25% tariffs will be imposed on India, and the amount of tariffs was later on increased to 50%. Now, it is clearly stated that these tariffs have been brought against India for importing Russian oil. Now, the Russian oil which is being imported by India, it was the idea of the previous US administration under Joe Biden, where it asked India to purchase Russian oil in order to free up the oil of the Middle East, which would then be purchased by the US government and its European allies. Since both India and the US, along with its allies, competing for the Middle Eastern oil would result in very high oil prices and would result in severe economic problems for all these nations. India buys Russian oil and it is refined within India, and for the most part, it is consumed within India itself. Some part of it is definitely exported to the European nations. And this is the reason why the US President Donald Tariff, we all know that his name is Donald Trump, but I believe Donald Tariff would be a more appropriate name for him given the past few months in how he has acted and how he has imposed tariffs on the nations world over. So the Indian Foreign Ministry stated in a statement that the US government imposing tariffs on India for purchasing Russian oil is hypocritical. The reasons being that the US itself purchases enriched uranium from Russia for use in its nuclear power plants, and it also purchases large quantities of Russian fertilizers for its farmers. And the same is true for the European governments as well. European government is importing Indian oil, which they are clearly aware that it is being sourced from Russia and refined in India. And also, Russian fertilizers are being purchased by the Europeans as well. So this decision is clearly hypocritical in nature. Now, going to the motivations of the US President as to why he has imposed these tariffs against India, there is some speculation that Donald Trump expected the Indian Prime Minister to recommend him for a Nobel Peace Prize for bringing about ceasefire between these two nuclear powers, which he didn't. President of United States has acted in a vengeful manner, I believe, for not being recommended for a Nobel Prize by the Indian Prime Minister. The ceasefire was clearly a decision taken by mutual understanding between these two nations, and the US President had very little to nothing to do with this particular ceasefire. It must be noted that the previous administration under Joe Biden had asked India to purchase Russian oil in order to stabilize the global oil prices, and this stability has resulted in a balanced pricing of oil all over the world. If it hadn't been done, the oil prices would have increased exponentially. So India was actually acting with consent of the US government in purchasing the oil from Russia. Now, these actions of President Tariff, Donald Tariff, are very clearly actions of an immature person who has acted in personal interest and in a vengeful manner. The refusal to nominate him for the Nobel Prize for stopping the India-Pakistan conflict is speculated to be one of the primary reasons why these tariffs have been imposed. Now, foreign policy experts within the US itself have criticized the US president for imposing 50% tariffs on India, stating that these actions of President Trump have resulted in a destruction of relationship between the US and India, which was created by painful negotiations and diplomatic activities and efforts of past few decades. The trust that existed between these two nations has evaporated, and it is it is very unlikely that the government of India and India as a nation would trust the word of the US government anywhere in the future. This has also resulted in Russia, China, and India coming closer, which was clearly evident in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit that was organized. And these three powers coming together is definitely a major foreign policy crisis for the current US administration. And it would be interesting to note how the US government reacts to this development. That is all for today. Thank you.